There is a sound that enters a room at night and changes the quality of the air. Not a loud sound, not a violent sound. A low, hollow call from somewhere outside the house, from a wall, from a nearby tree, from the roof of the compound. And something in the body, before the mind has finished waking, goes still. Not frightened exactly. Still. The way you go still when something in the room has changed and you have not yet identified what. You have heard this sound. If you grew up in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Kenya, in Cameroon, or if your parents or grandparents did and they have ever told you about it, you know exactly which sound I mean. An owl, at night, near the house. And you know, whether you will say it aloud or not, that nobody in the house went back to sleep easily after hearing it, not because of superstition, because of something older than superstition, something that your grandmother's body knew before your grandmother's mind had words for it. Tonight, I want to tell you what King Solomon would have said if he had heard that sound. Not whether to be afraid, not a vague reassurance that everything is fine. What he would have said specifically about the category of what you were hearing, and exactly what he would have done about it, step by step, before he went back to bed. And I want to show you that your grandmother's response, whatever form it took, was not folk belief being politely tolerated by religion. It was the correct Solomonic demonological response, preserved across thousands of years through the hands of women who never needed a library to maintain what they knew was real. Let me begin with the text, because this is where it becomes, for me, almost impossible to treat as coincidence. The book of Isaiah, chapter 34. Isaiah 34 is a chapter of judgment. The prophet is describing what God's judgment looks like when it falls on a place, the desolation, the emptiness, the reversal of all the signs of life. The land becomes waste, the cities are abandoned, and into that emptiness specific creatures move, verse 13. Thorns will overrun her citadels, nettles and brambles her strongholds. She will become a haunt for jackals, a home for owls, verse 14. Desert creatures will meet with hyenas, and wild goats will bleat to each other. There the night creature will settle and find for herself a place of rest. The night creature, in Hebrew, liyliyth. The word is spelled lamd, yod, tar. Strong's number H3917. This word appears exactly once in the entire Hebrew Bible. Once. And when you reach for the root, the word's foundation is laylah, night. The creature of the night, the thing that belongs to darkness. Now here is the first layer. The word structurally mirrors the Babylonian term lilitu, night monster, night demon. A class of entity in Babylonian demonology that predates Isaiah, that predates even Solomon, that the ancient Near Eastern world understood as a specific category of night-moving spirit. The King James Bible translates this verse with the words screech owl. The New Revised Standard Version says night creature. The New International Version and the English Standard Version both say night bird. For 100 years, scholars have argued about what liyliyth means. Some, following the biological tradition, like the scholar Judith Blair and others, say it was a species of nocturnal bird. Others, following the Septuagint, which translated it as onokentauros, a kind of demon, say it was always a spirit entity. I want to show you why this argument is actually beside the point, because the Hebrew did not necessarily make the separation we are making. Ancient Hebrew demonology did not always draw a clean line between the animal form of an entity and the spirit inhabiting that form. The owl was not in one category, and the spirit was in another. The owl was the form the spirit took, or more precisely, when a spirit of that category approached a household at night, the owl was the sign. The bird and the entity were read together. And the scholars who have been arguing for a century about which interpretation is correct have been arguing, I believe, over a distinction that the text deliberately does not make, because the text's authors understood what both sides of the argument are trying to express. The word liyliyth encodes both. That ambiguity was not a failure of precision, it was the precision. Now let me show you what happened to that single word after Isaiah wrote it. The post-biblical Jewish tradition, Talmud, Midrash, Zohar, took the word liyliyth and built from it one of the most detailed and extensively documented entries in Jewish demonology. Lilith. Talmud Bavli, Tractate Niddah, Chapter 2, page 24, IB, Lilith is described. Talmud Bavli, Tractate Shabbat, page 151b, a night-flying spirit that targets unprotected persons, particularly sleeping children in households where the spiritual barriers are down. The Zohar, the central text of Jewish mystical tradition, describes Lilith specifically as the screaming night bird, a spirit that takes bird form, a spirit that haunts desolate places, a spirit that approaches unprotected households at night to test their defenses, a spirit associated with Isaiah's liyliyth, the same word, the same root, the same entity class. Now think about what this means. The single most feared female demon in all of Jewish mysticism, the entity that the Talmud devotes extensive warnings to, that Jewish households for centuries protected against with specific amulets and prayers, that is depicted in medieval Jewish art with bird claws and wings, is constructed from a single word in Isaiah 34 verse 14, a word that means night creature, a word whose root means night, a word that shares its structure with the Babylonian term for night demon. And the tradition that grew from that single word described Lilith as precisely what your grandmother's tradition identified as dangerous about an owl near the house at night, a spirit that moves at night, that takes the form of a nocturnal bird, that approaches unprotected households, that targets the spiritual defenses of the home. The Jewish mystical tradition and your grandmother's Nigerian tradition were naming the same entity from two completely different continents, with no documented line of communication between them, arriving at the same classification through independent roads. And I find that remarkable. Not as proof of anything I'm asking you to believe, as a convergence that asks to be explained. Now let me bring the Yoruba tradition into this, because here is where the convergence becomes, for me, genuinely difficult to file under coincidence. In Yoruba cosmology, the owl is called owiwi, and the owiwi is understood as the primary vehicle for Aje. Aje is the night witch power, a form of concentrated spiritual force wielded by practitioners who travel at night to test and attack households that are spiritually unguarded. When Aje spirits move at night, they do so in the form of night birds, primarily the owl. An owl calling near a Nigerian home at night, particularly if it perches consistently in the same location over several nights, is understood in this tradition not as a random visit from a bird. It is active spiritual reconnaissance. The spirit is testing the household's defenses. It is circling the boundary, looking for the entry point, assessing the strength of what protects the home. This is not a dying tradition held by elderly people in rural areas, while urban Nigerians smile politely. A peer-reviewed study in the journal Practical Theology from 2024 documents that Nigerian Pentecostal communities, educated, urban, professionally successful, engage seriously with this belief structure as a genuine live framework for spiritual warfare. This is not folk belief that Christianity has replaced. It is a framework that Nigerian Christianity and Nigerian traditional knowledge are holding simultaneously, because the people who live within both know that the nighttime reconnaissance is real. The owl near the house is not metaphor, it is a sign. And the question is not whether to respond. The question is how. Now let me show you the Igbo layer. In Igbo cosmology, in Ordinala, the traditional religious framework that predates Christianity's arrival in Igboland, the owl and related night birds are associated with ogwu practitioners, people who wield powerful spiritual medicine for protection or for harm. A night bird perching consistently near a compound is read as one of two things, either a warning, someone is working against this house, or a probe, a spirit traveler is testing entry points. The response in both cases is the same. You do not ignore it. You do not panic. You close the door it is looking for. This is where Solomon becomes essential, because Solomon did not encounter spiritual entities the way most people encounter them, with confusion, with fear, with a vague sense that something is wrong, and an equally vague prayer that it will go away. Solomon classified. The Testament of Solomon, a text preserved in manuscripts dating to the 1st through 3rd centuries AD, which I have described in previous videos, is one of the most extraordinary documents from the ancient world. It records Solomon's systematic interrogation of demonic entities. Each one is compelled to appear, to state its name, to confess the nature of its operation, and to identify the divine force or name that neutralizes it. It reads like a classified demonological encyclopedia. Solomon worked through 36 entities in this text, and among them, the entities with faces of birds, the entities that take animal form, the entities associated with the night and with the approach of the unguarded household. Solomon did not react. He did not produce elaborate ceremonies. He did not convene a council. He identified the category. He named the counterforce. He spoke the declaration that sent it away. The testament of Solomon's methodology for night creature entities follows a specific pattern. Step 1. Hear the sign. Not dismiss it, not panic over it. Identify it as belonging to a known category. Step 2. Name the category. This is a threshold entity. This is a night creature spirit. Isaiah 34's vocabulary applies here. Step 3. Invoke the counterforce. The divine name and authority that this category of spirit cannot resist. Step 4. Make the declaration aloud, not silently, not internally, aloud at the boundary of the space, and the entity departs. This is what the Testament of Solomon records as the correct procedure, not a lengthy exorcism, not a dramatic ceremony. 4 steps, purposeful, efficient, done. Solomon treated a night creature spirit at the threshold the way an experienced doctor treats a specific diagnosis, not with fear, not with improvisation, with the correct targeted response for that category. What your grandmother did, in whatever form her tradition had preserved it, whatever words she spoke, whatever actions she took when she heard the owl, was this. She had the correct demonological response. She just did not know where she had learned it, because the practice had been traveling without the text. And tonight the text is here. I need to tell you about Uncle Bolu. I was 16 years old. It was my first time visiting Lagos without my parents. 2 weeks during school holiday, staying with my mother's younger brother, Emmanuel Okafor. Everyone called him Bolu. Uncle Bolu was a Lagos man, a taxi driver. He had never gone to university. He had none of the academic framework that my father, the UCL historian, had spent his career building. He was a practical man, quietly devout in the way that has nothing to do with performance. He did not speak about his faith very much, but there was a quality to how he moved through the world that I noticed even at 16 and could not quite name. He lived in a compound in Mushin, crowded, alive at all hours the way Lagos compounds are. The second night of my visit, I was awake late, reading by a lamp. It was past midnight. An owl landed on the wall of the compound and began to call. I heard it. I went still in the way I have described, and then, almost immediately, I heard Uncle Bolu's bedroom door open. Not quickly, not in a rush. With the unhurried movement of a man who has heard something he recognized and knows exactly what to do about it. I heard him go to the kitchen. A brief sound, a small sound, liquid being poured into a cup. I learned later that my aunt kept a small bottle of olive oil on the kitchen shelf for specific purposes. Then I heard his footsteps move toward the compound gate. I could not see him. I could only hear through the open window. He spoke for perhaps 30 seconds, quietly, in Yoruba. I could not hear the words from where I was sitting. Then the sound of him returning inside. Total time from leaving his bedroom to returning to it. Perhaps 4 minutes. He did not wake the household. He did not conduct a lengthy prayer meeting. He did not call anyone on the telephone. He went to the gate. He spoke. He anointed the post with his thumb. He returned inside. The owl called twice more after that, and left. In the morning, Uncle Bolu said nothing about it. Not because it had not happened, not because it had not worked, because it was handled. There was nothing more to say. 3 weeks later, back in Nsukka, I asked my mother about what I had seen. She smiled in the way she smiles when she thinks the question is slightly obvious, but she is patient with it anyway. Bolu has always been like that, she said. His grandmother taught him. You hear it, you know what it is, you send it away, you sleep. This is not something to make a show about. I did not think about it again for 15 years. I was in my second year of graduate research at SOAS, working through a chapter on divine judgment literature and the vocabulary of desolation in the prophetic books. I had reached Isaiah 34. I reached verse 14, liyliyth. I looked up the Hebrew root. I looked up the Aramaic cognate. I traced the Babylonian parallel, lilitu. Then I opened the Zohar's treatment of Lilith, the screaming night bird, the spirit that approaches unguarded households at night. Then I opened my notebook to a fresh page, and I wrote one sentence. Uncle Bolu went to the gate. He spoke. He anointed. He slept. The man who had never gone to university had the precise, correct, demonological response. I needed 15 years in academic libraries to confirm it. The libraries confirmed it exactly. Before I give you the protocol, I want to address one direct question. Cast out the spirit. On what authority? This is the Acts 19 question. 7 sons of Sceva travel around Ephesus performing exorcisms in Jesus' name. They approach a man with an evil spirit and speak the formula Paul used. The demon's response is remarkable. Jesus I know, Paul I know, but who are you? The man attacks all 7 of them. They flee the house naked and bleeding. The demon did not question the name. The demon questioned the person speaking it. Who are you? Because the name is not the technology. The name is the channel through which the technology flows. And the channel only functions for the person who has legitimate standing in the relationship the name represents. Solomon had covenant standing with the God of armies. He had built the temple. He had housed the ark. When Solomon spoke a divine name over a spirit entity, he spoke it as a man whose covenant relationship with the commander of those armies was real and honored. The 7 sons of Sceva had a phone number for a kingdom they had never entered. Now here is what this means for every person watching this who comes from the African Christian tradition. Solomon's authority over night spirits was not magical. It was covenantal. It was the authority of a man in covenant relationship with the God who created the boundary between light and darkness. God who divided the day from the night on the first day of creation. God who set the stars in place and the overseers of the night sky, according to Job 38. God who is described in Psalm 134 verse 3 as the maker of heaven and earth, who watches over his people even at night. The authority to cast out a night spirit at the threshold of your home is not a priestly authority available only to scholars who have read the Testament of Solomon. It is the covenant authority of a person in genuine relationship with the God who made the night. And if you are a baptized believer in that covenant, through whatever Christian tradition carried you in, you have standing. Not claimed standing, actual standing. What tonight changes is whether you use it. Let me now give you Solomon's protocol for this specific situation. Based on the convergence I have described, Isaiah 34, the Testament of Solomon's methodology, the Yoruba owiwi tradition, the Igbo nightbird classification, here is the 4-step response. This is what Uncle Bolu did. This is what his grandmother taught him. This is what Solomon's tradition names and explains. Step 1. Do not dismiss it, and do not panic. Dismissal leaves the boundary unwatched. Panic energizes what is approaching. The spirit reads fear as an opening. Solomon's method always begins with recognition. You have heard the sign. You know what category of entity approaches this way. Name it to yourself in the language you have tonight. This is a night creature spirit at the threshold. Isaiah names it. Solomon classified it. You are not meeting something unknown. You are meeting a known category with a known response. Breathe. Stand up. Step 2. Go to the main entrance of the home. The doorway. The gate of the compound. The threshold. Not the window nearest the sound, not a back room. The primary entrance. You are placing yourself at the boundary, the point of encounter. The spirit is outside, testing the threshold. You are going to the threshold, not fleeing inward. Solomon always stationed himself at the boundary. He met the entities where they presented themselves. The Testament of Solomon records him in direct confrontation, not hiding behind closed doors while the spirit circled. You are doing the same. Go to the door. Step 3. Speak the counter-declaration aloud. This is the 30 seconds Uncle Bolu spoke at the gate. These are words I am giving you based on the exact theological sources I have described tonight. They are not my invention. They are the convergence of Isaiah 34, the testament of Solomon's naming protocol, and the divine title that appears throughout the Solomonic tradition as the binding authority over night creature entities. Speak this aloud, not silently, into the air of the threshold. This house is not a place of desolation. Yhwh Sabaoth, the Lord God of armies, has set the boundaries of this household. You are a night creature of Isaiah 34's category, and you have no standing here. By the name that Isaiah named and Solomon commanded, Spirit of the night, you are cast out from this threshold. Speak it clearly, with the calm confidence of a person who knows whose name they are speaking and whose authority stands behind it. Not theater, not volume, clarity, covenant standing. The voice of someone who is not requesting, but declaring. Step 4. Anoint the doorpost with olive oil. This is the physical act Uncle Bolu's aunt kept the oil for. The doorpost anointing traces to Exodus 30, the consecration of the tabernacle's entrance with olive oil as a covenant seal, the entrance of the sacred space, the boundary between inside and outside, marked as belonging to the divine. In previous videos, I have covered the Solomonic use of olive oil as a covenant material in detail. The short version tonight. The oil is not the magic. It is the physical sealing of the verbal declaration. Solomon never separated word from material act in his covenant practice. The declaration is the authority. The oil is the seal. Dip your thumb in olive oil. Touch it to the doorpost or to the frame of the door, the boundary point of the entrance. The declaration is sealed. That is the complete protocol. 4 steps. Duration, perhaps 90 seconds from walking to the door to returning inside. No drama required, no lengthy ceremony, no waking the household. Uncle Bolu did it in 4 minutes, including the time it took to get the oil from the kitchen. He went back to bed. The owl called twice more and departed. That is the correct Solomonic response. Before I close, I want to say something directly to those of you watching this and thinking about your grandmother. Your grandmother who prayed when she heard the owl, who had specific things she did, specific words she spoke, specific actions she took when that sound entered the compound at night. You may not know exactly what she said. You may not have been old enough to hear it clearly. You may have been told only what Uncle Bolu's grandmother told him. This is what you do. My mother taught me. Tonight I want to tell you what the libraries confirmed. Your grandmother was not superstitious. She was maintaining, through her hands, through her practice, through her mother's teaching, a demonological classification and counter-protocol preserved in Jewish mystical tradition, in the Solomonic manuscripts I have worked with at the British Library, in the Talmudic literature compiled from even older sources, and in the single Hebrew word Isaiah inserted into a judgment poem in the 8th century before Christ. 3 traditions, 3 continents, 3 independent chains of knowledge, all converging at the same threshold, all arriving at the same classification, all prescribing the same response. Name it, speak, seal the boundary, sleep. Solomon would have recognized your grandmother's practice immediately, not as something exotic, as the correct demonological response. She was right. Let me close where I began. There is a sound that enters a room at night and changes the quality of the air. A low, hollow call from outside the house, and something in the body goes still before the mind has finished waking. That stillness is not irrational. It is older than rationality. It is the body recognizing, before conscious thought has assembled the words, that the boundary of the home is being approached. Isaiah named it liyliyth. The Talmud's rabbis traced it to the screaming nightbird that moves in darkness toward unguarded places. The Yoruba tradition identified it as ajay, taking the form of the owiwi. The Igbo tradition knew it as the nightbird that announces someone is working against this compound. Solomon classified it as a threshold entity with a known category and a known counterforce. And your grandmother, whoever she was, wherever she was, in whatever city she carried her knowledge, closed the boundary before it opened, because she knew what was at the threshold. Tonight, you know too. You know what it is. You know what to do. You know whose name you carry. And you know that what your grandmother preserved in her hands and in her voice and in her specific action at the entrance of the compound was not superstition that enlightened modernity has outgrown. It was Solomonic knowledge, older than any library, accurate across every continent that named it, still real on the night you need it. When you hear the sound, you will know. And you will know what to do. Sleep well tonight, or perhaps don't, now that you understand what your grandmother already knew.